Ever since it was released on March 8th, the controversies surrounding Captain Marvel have gone from being meta-controversies about the conversation surrounding the movie and Brie Larson's knack for putting her foot in the mouth, to some very real controversies regarding the movie itself and its release. In addition to many feeling the movie was detrimental to the MCU at large, there have been accusations that institutions like Rotten Tomatoes and YouTube have conspired with Disney to manipulate the perception of the movie into appearing more positive than it is, as well as accusations that Disney and Fandango have inflated ticket sales and thereby the box office. Now, is there anything to this, or do we all, collectively, need to take off our tinfoil hats? In this editorial, I will first look into the movie's official box office numbers, before I move into the accusations that the movie's perception has been subject to manipulation, and the accusations that the box office numbers might have been inflated. Let us go back in time 1 week to the movie's opening weekend. In its first weekend of release, Captain Marvel earned about 153 million at the North American box office, which was touted as, quote, the biggest opening for a debut Marvel superhero to date. The Marvel solo movie Black Panther opened bigger, of course, but his debut was technically in Captain America Civil War, so they had to make up that new metric in order to make Captain Marvel's opening weekend figures seem even more impressive than they actually were. To be clear, the opening was a huge one which was in the upper end of industry estimates, but in the lower end of the long-range estimates from Box Office Pro, as covered in my first Captain Marvel editorial. Still, that only made it the third best March opener of all time, behind both Beauty and the Beast and Batman v Superman. Unless you were to account for inflation, that is, then Captain Marvel would have been the fourth best March opener of all time, as then the Hunger Games would have beaten it to the punch as well. Interestingly though, nearly 2/3 of the opening weekend audience were 25 and older, and 55% of them were male. This means that, along with Black Panther and the Wasp, Captain Marvel had the smallest gender divide of any MCU film during its opening weekend. Seeing as the movie is overtly feminist though, one could have expected the audience to skew even younger and be majority female, but as it stands, males over 25 were instrumental to the movie's success. Internationally, the movie also did great numbers to be sure, but again, not record-breaking. In China, for instance, the second biggest market in the world, Captain Marvel opened to about 90 million, making it the third biggest opening for an MCU film in that country, behind both Avengers Infinity War and Captain America Civil War. Internationally, the film earned 302 million, culminating in a total opening weekend gross of approximately 455 million, which, if not record-breaking, is impressive however you look at it. But the opening weekend is just one thing. The real story is the word of mouth and subsequent staying power it will have in the upcoming weeks. Case in point, Batman v Superman squarely beat Captain Marvel in terms of opening weekend box office, but it went on to break its own franchise. How will Captain Marvel fare in the all-important Week 2? Before we move on, let us consider the numbers to beat. The aforementioned Batman v Superman dropped 69.1% in its second weekend, and continued to plummet after that. That was bad. Star Wars The Last Jedi dropped 67% in its second weekend, which was equally bad due to it being released around Christmas when hauls generally should be better. By contrast, Wonder Woman only dropped 43.3%, while Black Panther only dropped 44.7%, and that opened higher and in March, so if anything is an apples-to-apples comparison, it is that. So to summarize, if Captain Marvel's second weekend drop is closer to 40 than it is to 50%, then that is fantastic. But if it is closer to 70 than it is to 60%, then that is disaster territory. At the time of making this video, we only have estimates to go by, but those estimates suggest a second week in domestic gross right around or slightly below 70 million, which would make for about a 55% drop, which is right in the middle between the two extremes set forth by Wonder Woman and Batman v Superman respectively, meaning Captain Marvel is holding okay, not as good as the movie's proponents would have liked, and not as bad as those critical of it would have hoped. Can we fully trust these numbers though? Over the course of the last week, critical fans have latched onto indications that there may be some level of manipulation going on coloring the perception of the movie. Gary over at Nerdrotic spotted a Sci-Fi Wire podcast in which actual professional reviewers openly admit that they on occasion will give unearned positive reviews just to retain their access to premieres, red carpet interviews, goodie bags, and a lot.
But here, all right, so here's the actual reality.
I was going to say, like, have you been on my mentions lately?
Here's where we actually are in the industry if you want to talk about, quote, access media. Every single person that wants to have access to things early, that wants to get access to things so that traffic is drawn to their site, will on occasion. Everybody at this podcast, everybody in our industry occasionally has to play softball, occasionally has to, look the other way a little bit. Everybody has to do it.
Then there is, of course, the entire Rotten Tomatoes debacle, the one that came after them removing the want to see meter. Bounding Into Comics reported that after the movie had opened, Rotten Tomatoes deleted an incredible 50,000 user reviews, leaving only in excess of 4,000. Their reason for doing so was that they believed bots were used to vote the movie down. By deleting these audience reviews, the audience score rose from 32 to 36%. We have no way of knowing if bots were used, and if there were, who programmed them and to what end. But the real question should be, how many legitimate reviews were taken down alongside any bot-generated ones? Moving on, in an article from Jack Coyle, film writer and critic for the Associated Press, anonymous Disney insiders claim that they have gotten better at battling what they decry as online trolls, and even an article from the New York Times state that the YouTube algorithm was altered specifically to promote mainstream and access media coverage on Captain Marvel while burying critical coverage from independent YouTube channels. All of these, when put together, do not paint a pretty picture. But there is more. On top of all of that, there are the claims of box office and ticket manipulation. Bounding Into Comics picked up on numerous tweets about suspiciously empty Captain Marvel showings across the US and did a little investigation of their own. They reached out to a theater owner who insisted on being anonymous, but who claimed that there were exactly 25 paid-for no-shows on each and every screening on Captain Marvel. Here it must be noted that since the tweets are all circumstantial and the theater owner in question is anonymous, this claim cannot be independently verified at this time. This should therefore be treated as a rumor and taken with a major grain of salt. This can't be real, surely. That's some conspiracy theory level stuff right there. I mean, think about it. Why would Disney even want to do such a thing? If a movie underperforms and the studio went and bought extra tickets just to inflate the box office, they'd still have to pay those tickets at full price, and they'd only get half or so of that money back. So they would only be adding to their losses. The only possible upside of that would be preventing the share price from falling right there and then in that time frame, and there would be very little point of that. Shares are, after all, just some artificial value in cyberspace that third parties can gamble a little bit back and forth with on a day-to-day basis. Share price only really matters when dividends are due or when major corporate actions are going on. If that is unfamiliar vernacular to you, a corporate action is, for instance, when a company issues new shares or if they buy another company. If one company buys another company, and the buying company intends to pay for it in whole or in part by issuing new shares, then that is about as major a corporate action as they come. Allow me to elaborate. In such cases where one company buys another and intends to pay for it in whole or in part by issuing new shares, then sometimes the seller has some leeway to choose how much of the settlement amount he wants in cold hard cash. Cash that the buyer will notice very much so is missing, and how much of the settlement amount he wants in shares, which the seller can just issue new of without feeling any brunt until a dividend is due. In other words, it is in the buyer's best interest that the share price is high, so that the seller will take as much as possible of the settlement amount in shares, and as little as possible in cash. But again, that is conspiracy theory. Ooh, tinfoil hat thinking. I'm sure an honest and decent corporation like Disney would never do that, so do treat any rumors of inflating the box office as rumor. Solid proof is needed before any accusations like that can be thrown around. So, going by the official numbers, Captain Marvel opened to a great but not record-shattering opening weekend, and the second weekend drop isn't a bad one, but not a terribly good one either. So, we shall see how it will hold up in the upcoming weeks. Till then, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.
If you like this video, then please help share it and share your opinion in the comments. Midnight's Edge aims to give the most comprehensive analysis and commentary on genre culture and entertainment. If you would like to see more of our videos, then please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and remember to indicate that you would like to be notified when new videos are uploaded. If you really like what we do, then please support us on Patreon until a better alternative comes along, or send us a direct donation through PayPal. Also check out our sister channel Midnight's Edge After Dark for live shows and other rants. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay tuned for more here at Midnight's Edge.